last weekend we had unranked heavyweights in our co-main event, and it was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. Now, it wasn't as bad as highly ranked heavyweights, like that time that Francis Ngannou fought Derek Lewis. We'll forget all about that. But Carlos Felipe taking on Jorgen Castro was terrible. And I know a lot of people are high on Carlos Felipe, and that's your prerogative, but it was an awful fight, and as soon as he faced a wrestler, he's going to have a hard time. Now, in this fight, we have a UFC debutant against a guy that we've seen look amazing in his UFC debut. And this is a classic fight where you could throw stones across the English Channel because you have England versus France. You have a UFC debut out of the Black Samourai, Baudot, and it's such an interesting fight because Tom Aspinall representing Team Calbon, and we saw it in his last time out on a card that was stacked with fighters from that gym. You had Darren Till taking on Robert Whittaker, you had Mike Grundy taking on Movsar Evloev, and you had Tom Aspinall taking on the biggest head scratcher of a guy in Jake Collier, who went from 85 to 205 to years off to 265. Tom Aspinall, what are you doing there? Well, you knew from his pedigree the fact that he trained highly in jiu-jitsu. He coaches in jiu-jitsu at the gym. And oh, by the way, took a few years off just for fun, decided to become a professional boxer. And who does he train with? I'm giving you a second, audience at home. You might tune out, but Tyson Fury. He trains with Tyson Fury. Not like I go to a gym that's got like Tyson Fury's name on the nameplate. This guy trains with the Tyson Fury. So we've seen that crispness in his boxing just improve fight over fight. And yeah, he hadn't fought the greatest level of competition on the regional scene coming into the UFC. And yeah, maybe Jake Collier wasn't the best litmus test. The kid came in there throwing cinder blocks. His technique looked amazing. His footwork was great. And just for a guy to have that good of boxing with that foundation in jiu-jitsu, Tom Aspinall could soon become a guy that you have to watch out for in the heavyweight division. We see it with Rodrigo Nascimento in this card. And yeah, he might win, he might lose. I don't know. I'm not a clairvoyant. But we've seen it where that guy's jiu-jitsu is so good. He trains with such good strikers. Maybe he could pull things together. He's undefeated and go on a run. Tom Aspinall is one of those guys that had that foundation in jiu-jitsu, brought his hands together, and boom, here he is. Now he's taking on Baudot, and this is a guy that, he trains out of another great gym in the world, MMA Factory. Main training partners include Francis Ngannou, Cyril Gane, and you've seen Ferdinand Lopes just do big things in MMA. That's a gym that you definitely have to watch out for. Now, for Monsieur Alain, he's coming up from 205 pounds. He had a fight against not Sam Stout, but Todd Stout, guy that trains in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, for the TKO Light Heavyweight Championship. And listen, Matt, we've gone back. We watched that terrible highlight reel if you're not Dalcha champ with EFC. But if you're Alain Baudot, man, the guy got knocked out so hot and heavy against Dalcha Lujanbula. It didn't go his way. In the Todd Stout fight, he lost it. He threw caution to the wind in his striking. And then when and I hate to use cliche, but when the rubber hit the road, the guy got taken down. Stout took his back, submitted him, and then, my God, it seems like every week we have to talk about a fighter whose fight's overturned to either a no contest or a loss. But Todd Stout, that fight is now a loss on his record, and for Alain Baudot, it's considered a win, even though he lost it. So for Alain Baudot, I just worry about the wildness of his striking. Yeah, will it win him some fights? It's won him 8 this far, 7. But in a fight against Tom Aspinall, man, I worry.
Yeah, speed kills, and I really can't stress this enough.
It was a driving campaign, not a drug campaign.
Exactly, but I can't stress this enough that in MMA, speed is way more important than power, because with speed, it matters a lot more how many times you can hit your opponent than how hard you can hit your opponent, because we've seen it more times than not. Volume strikers tend to beat power strikers, and I do think Tom Aspinall's in this really interesting position in the heavyweight division right now, because other than the champ Stipe Miocic, and I'm going to say that Tom Aspinall's boxing is on this level, I'd argue he has some of the better pure striking in the division. Now, of course, you have to add in the other MMA skills to that, but Tom Aspinall's a guy who can go out there, has good footwork, has really good footwork, has good cardio, and he's another guy, we had mentioned this in the Chris Daukaus video, where Chris Daukaus, if he really wanted to, he is more of a cruiserweight. Tom Aspinall's kind of that same body type too. Not the biggest heavyweight you're going to see.
6'5", though.
He is 6'5", but again, when you see his frame, he's built kind of like Jean Vellante. He's not one of these guys who looks like...
Time out. Not 2020 Jean Vellante.
Not 2020 Jean Vellante. But he is one of these guys, you can tell he doesn't have to cut to make weight. He walks around at about 240, 245, so it's not like it's this massive weight cut for him, and he fights quite comfortably in the division. But back to the speed. The hand speed of Tom Aspinall is going to give a lot of guys problems in this division. No, he's not the most powerful guy. He doesn't have this crazy loop to his shots, and that's the thing that makes him dangerous, because in heavyweight, a lot of guys rely on the fact that they can knock you out with one punch. Tom Aspinall, that's not really his game plan going into the fight. He realizes that if he does just stick to his boxing skills, the worst case scenario is you're going to try to take him down. And as Craig kind of mentioned, it's not really a bad thing for him. Tom Aspinall's pretty good on the ground. Black belt jiu-jitsu, teaches jiu-jitsu at his gym. And I know I'm making Tom Aspinall sound like some world beater right now, but when you look at the prospects at heavyweight, I'm not going to say he's going to beat like a Cyril Gane tomorrow. But I do think Tom Aspinall's a guy who can go out there, rattle off 3-4 wins in a row, and we will see him in the top 15 sooner rather than later.
And I mean, I hate to rag on him because I really do hope for the best out of Alain Baudot. But if you look at his record, I mean, so the fight against Todd Stout, it's a DQ. It's a fight that he lost, but it was overturned after the fact. It was a year and 5 months ago. So his last real win was over Yuto Nakajima back 2 years, 4 months ago. And at the time, Nakajima was 0-2. So then you look at the loss against Dalcha Bhullar. That fight was 3 years, 2 months ago. Then before that, he had a win over Yusuke Masuda, who was 6-11-3. That's 3 years, 7 months ago. Listen, sometimes guys break out of that in a big way. They come out and you think, man, this guy's fought cans all the way up. What's going to happen? And then he starts beating actually good fighters. And you go, wow, this guy's awesome. But from Alain Baudot, I just haven't seen it on the regional scene. I've seen wild striking. I've seen looping punches. And it's not to the point where we critique high-level fighters. And again, what the hell do I know? But we'll critique really high-level fighters and say, well, geez, fighter A has really nice punches right down the middle, has a nice whip at the end of his or her shots, they have power, versus somebody that throws a lot of hooks, a lot of looping shots, and we can get really critical when it gets to the nitty-gritty. But this is one of those fights where we've seen Tom Aspinall perform at this high level with his technique, with his power, what he can do. Maybe he gets clipped. You always have to worry about that at heavyweight. For Alain Baudot, I'd like to see where he weighs in at heavyweight for this one because, like you said, Tom Aspinall, I've got the recent weigh-in in his last fight against Jake Collier coming in at 248. I'm not a fan of the Jean Vellante comparisons because, man, that guy's body at 265.
No,
yikes.
and of course he's way better than Jean Vellante.
I hear where you're coming from. So for Baudot, there's way too many question marks. If we look at it over on Tapology, Matt, everybody's in agreement. Out of 599 votes, 93% going with Aspinall, 86% got him by knockout. If you look over at the odds, it's another one where it's overwhelmingly in the court of Aspinall. Open to -350, now -445 for his opponent, Alain Baudot. Open to +250, now to +342. I think it's one that you fade anyway, but yeah, I'm going overwhelmingly with Tom Aspinall.
So, yeah, this whole card is just full of a bunch of massive favorites and massive underdogs, and Tom Aspinall, it's hard not to side with the favorite in this. When you look at just everything as a pure skill set and kind of try to rank both guys at a 10, there's not many things Alain Baudot does better than Tom Aspinall. So for that, I'm going to have to go with Aspinall, because you really just have a really good technician over a guy with big power, and he is unorthodox, but those big looping shots, if you are a really solid and technical boxer, or really just striker, you're going to be able to kind of see your way through those, be able to dodge those big shots and land with your own. So I think it's going to be Aspinall. Probably he's going to run away with this.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to this fight. We both have Tom Aspinall to get the win. You're going to want to keep it locked in as we have an extended look at our main event between Magic Marlon Moraes and no nickname Cory Sandhagen. I'm really looking forward to it. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt, as we always say.
Let's get into it.